this should be information that underlines what we need to do to move this country forward. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's great to see you. My name is David Leis. I'm the proud host of Leaders on the Frontier Live. And do we ever have a program for you today? We're delighted you can all join us. And on this June 25th, 2026, the year of our Lord, we have a lot to talk about today, including citizenship, our country, Canada, as we approach July 1st, Canada Day, as it's known. And I am very proud of this country. I'm proud to be a citizen. And I realize that we have a lot of opportunity in this country that many in this world do not. And we're in a country with extraordinary history and freedoms and opportunities, and we can't take that for granted. So we're going to talk, I think, about, well, a foundational issue. At the Frontier, we like various principles that guide better public policy, and one of them is, of course, empowering our citizens. So we want to dive into the program today. We'll get to a dynamite panel that is joining us to discuss this very important topic. And today we want to also shift to a tragedy, as many of you have heard about in Montreal. And I'm very grateful that Rod Kurtz, the director of news at Bridge City News in Lethbridge, can join us. Welcome, Rod.
Thanks, David. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, Rod, I'm so glad you could join us. You have been monitoring the situation in Montreal and another tragic death of an officer. Can you tell us basically what has happened here?
Well, the shooting, obviously a shock to everyone across the country, happened in Montreal in a neighborhood, Côte-des-Neiges. There was calls, police responded to calls of a shooter shooting from I believe, a third floor window. At that point, just people running for cover, not really sure what was going on. The shooting eventually ended up out on the street on a plaza in this neighborhood. And that's when police came on the scene. Police got involved. There was crossfire. An officer was killed, Mohammed Lamine Ben Redouane, and also a bystander, civilian, Michel Mazrahi, was also shot. Mazrahi was 68 years old, was a tailor who had a shop, very kind man. Everyone in the community just saying what a wonderful person he was. Ben Redouane was a veteran officer, and again, extraordinary person. Funerals were held for both men yesterday. So the city is still in a state of shock. And I think what was even, I guess, maybe more shocking is when news of the shooting came out, then all of a sudden we found out that the alleged shooter was from Lethbridge, was from Alberta. Seth Scott Hatfield, 25 years of age, Dean's List student at the University of Lethbridge. Later on, we learned there was a manifesto over 100 pages long, written more like an essay than just a manifesto. It was in depth. It was written almost like an essay with attributions and references to other articles. And just to put this into kind of a nutshell, having read some of the manifesto myself, Seth Hatfield I would say was troubled, to say the least. He would fall into a category we would call incels. And this is kind of an online subculture. It's a short form. It stands for men who are involuntarily celibate. So these would be young men. It's kind of an online subculture of men who are looking for a relationship with women, whether that's romantic or sexual, and aren't able to find partners and have become angry because of that. And that anger, certainly online, you can go down some rabbit holes. And in that manifesto, there's a lot of anger. And Seth Hatfield in that manifesto also talked about violence, talked about revolution, and certainly suggested that he was willing to die for that revolution. So lots of details still to come with this, David, but kind of a shock right across the country that it was connected here to Southern Alberta. And obviously then the other irony, I guess, for me was realizing that, a shooting in Montreal, and of course, we all go back to 1989 with the shooting at École Polytechnique, and Marc Lépine gunning down 14 women there. Again, certainly anti-feminist sentiments. And I won't get into his whole upbringing, but there's certainly more to it there in the home that Marc Lépine grew up in. and in terms of how his father treated women. But it's just sad irony there of another shooting in Montreal. And certainly more information will come on this, but that Lethbridge connection was a shock to all of us, for sure.
Indeed, it was. Well, look, Rod, I want to thank you for joining us and bringing us up to date on really what's a changing story,
Yeah.
but also trying to understand better about this, because that's certainly one of the things that makes this country special. Is generally it's a pretty peaceful country, but these are things that are real tragedies that make us wonder and try to make sense of this. So thank you for joining us today, Rod.
Yeah, you're welcome, David. Good to be here.
So that was Rod Kirks, the director of news at Bridge City News, based in Lethbridge. So in other headlines, I did want to underline a couple things that are happening across this country, one of which is efforts to ban coal, of all things. Coal is an incredibly important energy source, as well as obviously ingredient for virtually everything. But there's a variety of environmental groups now opposed to coal mining, and they may petition cabinet to blacklist the rock as toxic. And that's according to the Department of Health. And yesterday, and that was reported just the other week in Blacklock's reporter. We also note that the inflation rate has gone up to 3.2%, and much of that is also in part to the rise in oil prices. We also know that there was a interesting headline here. The Public Health Agency at the federal level has erased the term injury from the name of a $75 million compensation fund for Canadians injured by COVID shots as part of a rebranding exercise. And that's according to a released internal memo. Staff were assigned to do a Google search on the most appropriate substitute for, quote, vaccine injury support. So what does that mean? In other news, we know that a Liberal appointed trustee yesterday quit the board of the Federal Museum of Human Rights in Winnipeg with an appeal to Heritage Minister Mark Miller to investigate anti-Israeli content. The Canadian Museum for Human Rights on last Saturday is to open an exhibit depicting the founding of Israel as a catastrophe. So this saga continues to unfold. It's interesting as well, the recent appointment of a new judge to the Supreme Court of Canada. The Prime Minister nominated Manitoba's Glenn Joyal to the Supreme Court. And it's interesting, I noticed this compilation of an update stats on the top 20 oil producing countries in the world. You'll see number one is the United States, Russia, Saudi Arabia, and then, of course, Canada. So these are very significant figures and opportunities for us. It's no wonder that the export of oil and gas is the number one industry in this country. In other news, we also noticed that this is according to the Blacklock's reporter in terms of government documents, that the Department of Health has a total of 67 federal inspectors to monitor the diversion of legal marijuana into the black market nationwide. And that's according to a detailed report. The disclosure followed allegations that tons of cannabis have been diverted since Parliament legalized recreational marijuana some 8 years ago. And so this is feeding into the illicit market. We also noticed this week that there is a Islamic call to prayer, and that will be tested in downtown Regina. And the effort here is, the idea is that this will be broadcasted, call to prayer starting this Friday. And it'll be interesting to see how the community reacts to that call to prayer. And finally, we've got Ottawa names the first three major projects that could be fast-tracked in the national interest. And so we'll learn more about the details of those projects shortly. So that's some of the headlines. There's an awful lot going on. I also want to mention that we are excited about today's program. We've got a lot to talk about as we look to our agenda. We want to talk about, does citizenship matter in 2026? And of course it does. We want to talk about, what does it mean to be a citizen? Is it just all about rights? Or what about responsibilities of citizenship? And how is citizenship being undermined? For example, we have a big state pushing out citizens, and what does that do to the civic society, which is so foundational for not only our opportunities to work together in community, but to build a more prosperous society? So we're going to talk about that, including should Canada be celebrated for a whole month? For example, this is juxtaposed to things like Pride Month. We celebrate Canada Day. So we're going to dive into that, and we have an all-star panel today. I have Dr. Gerry Bowler joining us as a history professor. He's also a senior fellow at Frontier, an overall great guy. So welcome, Gerry.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
And of course, Dorothy Dobbie, who's a former member of Parliament from Winnipeg. And Dorothy is also you notice a very interesting pin, Dorothy, and that is from the Order of Canada. So bravo on you.
Thank you. Thank you, David. It's good to be here.
And of course, the regular Dr. Marco Navarro-Genie, Vice President of Research at Frontier, is joining us. A warm welcome to you, Marco.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Well, I am really actually quite excited about our conversation. I think we have a fascinating topic. We can go in a number of directions, but I wanted to start off with a really basic question, and that is, what does it mean to be a citizen of this country? And just before I go around the table, so to speak, asking for your response, I wanted to share with you a poll. And this is a straw poll that was just done. Our producer, Lorraine, shared it online a mere 23 hours ago. And the question was, is Canadian citizenship losing its meaning? And the answer was an overwhelming yes, 96%, 2% no, and then 1% I don't know. So lots of comments there. So I'd love to get your response, Gerry. Why is citizenship so important? What does it mean?
Well, it's a kind of belonging. To be a citizen is to be a member of a particular community with shared values, shared story. And we can see in Canada that story is not as widely shared as it once was. Mm-hmm. That some parts of it have now been ruled off limits, that we are told that we ought to be ashamed of much of our tradition. The belonging part has also been watered down. It's much easier to get Canadian citizenship than it used to be. It used to be you had to have at least 5 years of consecutive residence. That's been watered down to 3. Large immigrant non-citizen influx. So I would say that our sense of belonging has become less valuable to Canadians than it used to be.
Okay, thank you, Gerry. Dorothy, your comment about the importance of being a citizen.
Well, I think I agree with Gerry too, for the most part. I think that the feeling, the values that we shared, that we grew together, we developed together because we were struggling for survival in this new land over the last 150 years, have been diluted in the last decade by this tremendous influx, 6 million people from various other parts of the world. And it takes a long time for that kind of dilution to be absorbed and to be, I guess, assimilated in a way. And when it is over, that will be probably a slightly different country than we've known in the past. So when people ask me, how do I feel about being Canadian right now? I guess the word most people would answer would be confused.
Very interesting. We'll come back to that point about confusion. We're getting a lot of comments from the audience. Victoria says, I love my people and I'm not giving up. And many other comments like I am not giving up. Immigrant problem, we have to get the capital parties out. I'm not quite sure if I totally understand that. But yeah, so keep the comments coming. Marco, what is your comment about the importance of citizenship?
Well, it is hugely important because as Gerry was saying, it is kind of the common bond, the common glue of a society, and we can get into it. Mm-hmm. The issue is that it has been devalued. we have the value that at the level of government, not necessarily at the level of the people in the community. But basically, if you can think of it, we stopped attaching a great deal of meaning to it. And what happens when you stop attaching meaning to things, people are less interested. The number of people becoming Canadian citizens has decreased by more than half. So is something that people want less and less. And to some extent, it's almost like devaluing the currency, right?
Wait a sec, Marco. That's kind of a surprise. You're saying that there's fewer people wanting to be citizens?
Yes.
Yeah, they have to be.
The statistics show that, at the beginning, for example, 15 years ago or so, there were more or less about 380,000 people becoming citizens over a span of time. And in the equivalent span of time, a decade later, there is less than 150,000 wanting to become citizens. This is not a surprise to me, right? In a place where we are supposed to be a post-national state, meaning that we are beyond nation. Well, nation is the community we want to belong to. And so if there is no community to belong to, then the exercise of becoming a citizen, a member of this community, is kind of meaningless. So that's not really a surprise.
Okay. I think it's a very important observation. We're connecting a lot of dots here. I did want to mention that in other comments, I will never forget what you taught us, my elders. You guide my way, and that's from Victoria again. But there were some comments. Anyways, please bring them in. It's interesting. I saw my trusty Canadian Citizenship Study Guide, and I wanted to share with you that in this section called Rights and Responsibilities of Citizenship, and this is from a guide a number of years ago, it says Canadian citizens have rights and responsibilities. These come to us from history, are secured by Canadian law, and reflect our shared traditions, identity, and values. And what I found interesting was that the emphasis isn't just simply on rights such as, well, freedom of conscience and religion, freedom of thought, and freedom of speech, but also on responsibilities. And it goes on to say things like obeying the law, taking responsibility for one's self and one's family. Imagine that. Serving on a jury, let alone military service. Voting in elections, helping others in the community, protecting and enjoying our heritage and environment. Does that sound like a pretty good list, Gerry, that we should be emphasizing in our schools today?
It is, but Canadians are by nature, and I think always have been, rather lazy citizens. We're not enthusiastic participants in citizenship. We don't join political parties to any great extent. We don't vote in overwhelming numbers. The number of us who could name more than a handful of premiers, I'm not sure I could name any senator.
Interesting. I'll say Senator Lynn Byack.
Senator Lynn Byack, alas.
Okay.
Good senator.
Yeah. We don't put much effort into citizenship. And one thing about citizenship is you have to participate in the national.
Just hold on for a sec, Gerry. You're not going to get away with that comment. You just called us lazy citizens, Canadians? Yeah. Are you sure about that? How dare you come on this program as we come up to Canada Day and you call us lazy citizens?
Well,
he's got to speak for himself.
If participation, in the democratic process is any indication, the majority of citizens can't be bothered. Look at the turnout for things like municipal elections, school board elections, crickets. Provincial election, a little better. Federal, we're at least over 50%, but that's a declining number. Number belonging to political parties, number that support, think tanks, various But look at the decline of community clubs. My father's generation, every member was a kinsman, a lion, an oddfellow, a Kiwanis. Used to do tremendous things in the community. Now you can hardly find a Rotarian in town. We generally don't participate, and then we've got whole chunks of the country, like Quebec, that can't be bothered in the Canadian project.
Well, okay, so Gerry, I take your point, and I didn't mean to make fun of you when you called us lazy citizens, because you're onto something. Well, I mean, I think maybe another way to say it, Dorothy, are Canadians taking their citizenship for granted? Is that what's going on here?
Well, first of all, I'd have to ask where Gerry lives, because I don't think this is a universal point of view. And where are you from, Gerry? Are you from east or the west?
Yeah, I was one of your constituents.
Were your source from Winnipeg?
Yes.
Still?
Still.
I guess we live in different neighborhoods then, because I don't find that at all. I do find that there's always been a split between those who don't get involved and those who do, and those who do it's always been a small. Maybe that's just Canada, but Manitoba particularly, I think, is very involved in the community and in a number of different ways. And yeah, you're right. Some of the old, clubs have dwindled, the Legion and the Rotary clubs and so on. But that's just the sign of the times. There's so many other things to distract people now. But as far as citizen involvement in various things, maybe I'm just a sucker for being involved, but I don't find any lack of interest in getting that way. And fundraising is still not easy, but it's still a very large part of what we do here in Manitoba. And yeah, you're right. Most people don't know. Even my daughter, who is a lawyer, who probably couldn't name a senator. But has that changed a lot, do you think? Maybe I'm just Pollyanna. I don't know. But I do feel strongly that the core of Canadian citizenship cares deeply about the country, cares deeply about what happens politically, isn't always well informed, because we have to rely on the information channels. And right now they're way more confused than ever. And they're not perhaps very well educated in it, because I don't even know if there are civics classes in every schoolroom across the country, or in any right now. So they know very little about how government works. They don't even know what the separation of responsibilities between the federal and the provincial governments are. Certainly my daughter, the lawyer, who is a very key figure at High Life Foods, did not know what the separation of responsibilities were. So maybe it's an educational thing. Maybe we're not doing our part in making sure that our fellow citizens and our new citizens are getting the message. Then just let me mention the whole new citizen thing. Perhaps, and I'm just shocked that it's fallen so far to half of people who want to become citizens every year. But maybe it's because it's too easy not to be a citizen, too easy to get the kind of supports you would get if you weren't a citizen. And so what are the benefits? Well, I'm getting the benefits already, so why should I buy in? I think we need to think about that.
Can you just pause? Are you saying, Dorothy, that we perhaps give out too many benefits to non-citizens?
Well, I'm saying that may be one of the reasons. I'm not going to judge the amount. I'm simply going to say that what are the benefits? If the benefits are already on the table, there's not a lot of impetus to do something more.
Precisely, yeah. Well, and this is the point, is that by definition, if you're a citizen of a country, you're entitled to the rights and responsibilities of what it means to be Canadian. And if you just kind of leak that out as a benefit to, well, anybody who's not a citizen, then what's the point of becoming a citizen? I mean, so I think you're onto something there, Dorothy. Marco, what do you say? Is Gerry onto something in the sense that, again, Canadians are taking citizenship for granted? What's your thesis?
I think that we place a great deal of expectation on the idea. The reality is, since we've had sort of liberal democratic experiences going back to the Greeks, it has never been that the entire membership of the community participated. Mm-hmm. Certainly, in ancient Greek, it was only a handful of people in the early end. There were only males. The same thing in the Florentine Republic or in the American Republic. Mm-hmm. So you can view sort of political activity and community activity as an activity. that some people will embrace and some people prefer. No different, I'm sorry to say, than hockey. Some people like hockey and some people don't, and some people like politics and some people do not. But the reality is that citizenship is supposed to be something more than just collecting goods and benefits from the state. That's not citizenship. That's basically a reduction of some kind of, I would say, medieval clientelism. When we simply expect things from the state, we simply expect we become clients. But citizenship is about an essence that binds the community, and you don't need a state to have citizenship. By the way, right? I don't need a state to feel connected and bonded to Gerry and to Dorothy or to David. Citizenship is, from the Greek perspective, it was a civic friendship. It's something that we experience as a community. And the state is something that we, the citizens, give ourselves to protect ourselves. It comes after the idea of citizenship. But today, there is this expectation that the state is the manufacturer of citizenship. And so we have it backwards.
Your comment, Dorothy?
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was going to say that's a very good point. I was writing about this morning because for my article in the Sun on Sunday, and I'm thinking about the whole question of what your responsibilities are and what it means to be a citizen. And is it the same in every region? That's why, Gerry, I asked you, because my sense is that people who live in places like Manitoba and Alberta and Saskatchewan have a very wide vision. They have a very, I guess it's affected by the big blue skies and these endless spaces. And that seems to be diminished the more you move into communities that are tightly knit and very crowded, like Toronto or even downtown Winnipeg. The attitudes seem to change. They seem to become more insular. And then going back to your point, Marco, that the communities begin to form amongst themselves. The thing that's bothering me, though, is that they expect, that seems to enforce a particular type of activity and relationship with each other that, well, I'm not used to in my big wide open sky world of Manitoba, where ideas can be endless, they can be different, they can be freely exchanged, and that where at the end we come out with something a little bit better, even if we don't totally agree with one another. That seems to be somewhat lacking, especially in very tight-knit cities.
Your comment, Gerry?
Well, certainly I do worry about Canada's three metropolises, Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, as densely populated magnets for large numbers of migrants who are proving a little harder to digest maybe than previous generations. Now, in the long run, I think a generous liberal democracy can loosen up some of those ethnic bonds and create a Canadianness. But if the Canadian state and the Canadian thinking class are embarked on a plan to denigrate Canadianness, make us ashamed of our history, to tear down the statues of our founders, to treat our very presence here as an intrusion, as a mistake, to talk about so-called Canada or Turtle Island, to talk about me as a settler, and to have the compelled speech at every public gathering that implies that the majority of people in Canada are intruders, you're not going to create a healthy political or citizenship body. You're going to allow all kinds of ethnic and ideological silos, each of them vying for their share of state goodies.
I think that makes a lot of sense, Gerry. We started off by saying, what are the challenges that are really undermining citizenship? Because we know that citizenship, by its definition, is critical to building a country. You need people on a team that are rowing all in the same direction. There's a sense of not only unity, but pride that in terms of what you're building here is a worthwhile project. Because in my observation is that Canada has been an incredible country, not because of the government so much, it's because of the people. It's the citizens who believe that they have each other's back, that they're willing to, when things are called together, they work together in community in a way that brings goodwill, civility, service to each other, but also in the end, when they're called to serve, even in times of war, they don't just sit on their hands, they actually come forward. And Canada has that history in spades. It's a remarkable story that this continent, which is not an easy part of North America, that they were able to bring a civilization in working with everybody, including Aboriginal people. But this is the story of this country, and that's one that I am very proud of, that part of it. So that is, I think, the question then is, why is citizenship being undermined? Is it being dissolved in certain circles? And I think you're right. There's a kind of a tribalism. If you're taught in universities that it's all about your identity and your group, not about the individual and respect for each other as citizens, then you're really on the fundamentally the wrong track. Would you agree, Marco?
Yes. You alluded to a story, and citizenship, again, is about an essence that we share, that has a common past, a common present, and some kind of idea that we desire to inhabit the same future. And so that commonality is not an absolute single-mindedness. Is simply a sharing of a vision. And as Gerry alluded, by a myriad of government policies, we have become more segmented, more fragmented, and more divided in identities, in region, in activities, in genders, in different identities. We have ceased to dream of ourselves as a common people. We talk about over 600 different nations in this country. The Quebecois are a nation, the Acadians are a nation, the Métis are a nation. So we're not a nation by that definition, because we have 600 and some. And so that commonality and that sense of binding in a vision has been eroded. And the more it erodes, the less we feel that we belong together.
Very good point. Dorothy?
The identity politics issues is what you're talking about, and I absolutely agree. When we label people, we separate them. And it was interesting. I was at the repatriation of the HBC Charter last week, and Chief Blue Sky from Treaty Number 1 spoke, and he was wonderful. He was a guy who was a child of the 60s scoop, but his comments were, when he started out, I've noticed that people who have been here for several generations treat us differently from those who have come more recently. Now, just think about that, because the ones who've been here for several generations have handed down from their parents and their relatives and their personal histories these stories of cooperation and friendship and togetherness, partnership. I call these guys our first partners, and hopefully they feel the same way, and I know that people like him do. And yet lately, that has been deliberately attacked by these land acknowledgements. How does that do anybody any good? And I think about the whole Truth and Reconciliation findings, and I actually found both the leaders of that particular initiative, both very reasonable, very open, very receptive people. And their words, their findings have been so corrupted by those who have interest in division rather than partnership, that it's almost, how are we going to find reconciliation when everybody's focused on things that aren't even true, and making everybody feel guilty who weren't even here at the time, that they've done something horrendous, when that just is not true, even though there were tragic things, and there were tragic things in every family. It would be like the Irish immigrants who were sent here from Britain, who were, they were kind of outcasts in their own country because they were sharecroppers. They were sent to the coast. They were starving, and Lord Selkirk, who was the fifth or sixth kid in the family, became a lawyer because the rest of them all died first. He was the youngest. He actually spent his life trying to rescue these people, and he sent a bunch of them here as the Selkirk settlers. And how did they survive? They didn't survive because some guys here from another country were looking after them. They survived because Chief Peg was himself an immigrant from the Lakehead area, so rescued them twice. And so that partnership started, 400 years ago, more than 400 years ago, when the first British and Europeans came to Manitoba through Hudson Bay. And that has continued ever since. And we've lost that sense of communion, that sense of shared history, that sense of we built this country together. And when new people came in the 20s and 30s, and my mother's family, for example, came in, my father's family has been here for, since the 1700s. When my mother's family came in, they worked very hard. They went and tore up land, and just as the earlier settlers did in the 1800s and so on. And so they built kind of a new sense of communion, a new sense of contribution to the country. And it's that sense of contribution, I think, that we're missing. People don't feel they have to contribute anymore. And by the way, people like to be asked to contribute. It's very flattering to be asked for help. And we've forgotten how to do that.
Okay. Well, This is a precious culture that we have. We got to teach it to the next generation. We've talked a lot about citizenship, why it matters. It's foundational to building our country and the concerns and challenges. I want to talk a little bit more about solutions. Let's talk about how we strengthen citizenship.
Yeah.
So I want to bring up a few ideas. One is, should we teach civics in our schools? Should we be teaching, what is it again? Oh yeah, the next generation about how to be good citizens and what that entails, both rights and responsibilities. Do we need to rebalance immigration? We don't want just paper citizens. We want real citizens. Should all Canadians be required to serve in the military? If a country cannot mobilize its citizens to have the heart to serve in the military when things are done, if we let our military atrophy, are we sovereign as a country anymore? Obviously, these are important questions. I'm sure you've got lots of ideas. Gerry, what are your thoughts about solutions?
Well, as to civics in the schools, who defines citizenship? Right now, if we handed it to school boards, we would get the same old woke pieties.
Right.
So I'm not looking to that. Are we ready to have an honest conversation about immigration, to say that there are places that are less congenial to draw immigrants from? I doubt it. I doubt we're ready to have that conversation. The notion of national service might, if we expand it from the military, might work. If we could say every Canadian, without exception, every Canadian 18-year-old has to serve the nation for 18 months, 2 years, in the military, in an ecological save nature corps, in hospitals, in some kind of volunteer capacity that could bring people from various parts of the country together and focus on a national set of values. That might well work. But remember that it was conscription that just about wrecked the country twice in our history. So it's something we're going to have a deep think.
Yeah, no, those are very thoughtful comments. And yeah, to what extent can you, quote, force people to serve in the military? But it's an ethos. And I think in this context, it is encouraging that there are citizens rising up in response to, well, for example, in Kingston, Ontario, there's a story that we just shared last month that are coming together and demanding the resurrection, literally, of the statue of Sir John A. Macdonald, the incredible prime minister and founder of our country called Canada. So, it's amazing what people can do. What about you, Dorothy? What are solutions that you would recommend to us?
Well, I don't necessarily agree that you can't teach the mechanics of citizenship, the mechanics of how the government works in school. I think it should be a course all the way through grade school, so that when you reach the higher levels of school where they begin to talk politics, it's already ingrained in you. Just so you know, this is how we elect our government, this is how the Senate works, this is how, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The simple mechanics can be taught. And even if you've got woke people, there's not a heck of a lot you can do with the mechanics. So I think that we could and we should introduce some kind of training about what a citizen is and how you become, involved in Canada from the very beginning. Immigration, I think we need to pause it for a while. We need to just pause, just stop for a while, and give people a chance to settle down. Let us figure out how do we absorb this extraordinary number of people? How do we make them want to become citizens, and integrate them into the community, and find a way for everybody feeling comfortable, so that we're not labeling them. And I don't think we're ever going to choose where they come from. I don't care where they come from. I think people are people no matter where they are and where they're born. You're shaped by your environment. And once we get them there, they have to have an opportunity to become part of this environment. And I'm not sure, especially in the cities when they're living on the 70th floor on a 600 square foot apartment, that they have very much of a chance to do that, but it will happen. And finally, the question about recruitment. Yeah, I am totally on the side with the idea that conscription is not necessarily the best way to go. But I do feel that it's good right now that the government is redoubling its efforts to recruit people, because there are people who want to serve in the military, who want to serve their country. But really, I don't think we're encouraged in the past. And again, they have to drop some of this woke stuff. What are we doing in a combat group with a woman as the head? I mean, that's we're not built the same way, men and women. Thank goodness, we're different, and we have different roles. And I don't think it's natural for men who are going into combat to be led by women. Maybe I'm a little bit old-fashioned, but it seems to me that we've got to pick the best person for the job. And if it is a woman, well, then you take that, you accept that. But we're pushing that forward right now. We're making it impossible for men to get ahead. And that's kind of discouraging if you want to take those very masculine traditional jobs. And I don't think there's anything wrong with traditional masculinity, by the way, guys. Yeah. So I think we can have more recruitment. And I do give kudos to the government for at least trying to bring more people into the armed services.
Okay, very good. Dorothy, just before I turn to Marco for his ideas on solutions, I noticed the wonderful pin on your dress there. Can you explain what that is, Dorothy?
Oh, that's what they call the snowflake for the Order of Canada, which was for community service.
But this is a marker of extraordinary citizenship, Dorothy. So, bravo on you for receiving that. What did that mean to you to have that kind of award bestowed on you?
I still can't believe it. I can't imagine why I was lucky enough to be given this kind of recognition. And I see wonderful people around me every day giving with their whole heart and all of their energy. I had a conversation this morning with Doyle Pinouk, who was he's a local member of the MLAs here. And he's going to become the next president of the International Peace Garden. I'm so thrilled to hear this. His whole focus is on how does he raise money for them? How does he bring them into a brighter perspective? How does he bring Canada and the U.S. back together as partners and moving forward in the way we did before? And he's doing that not because he's getting paid, because we don't get paid for any of these things, but because he's passionate about what he's doing. He's going to leave being an MLA because he wants to move on and do more things for the country. I see that everywhere. I must know the wrong people. Gerry, I'm going to have to bring you into my group.
No, but this is it's almost like the 80-20 rule. You have some extraordinary citizens who are making things happen, and that's inspiring. So that, again, underlines how precious that is in this country and building it, and how we want more of it, not less. We want more of it. And we want more unity because we want a stronger country.
And invite people in.
Talk about elbows up. This is the way to do it. And this is the way to improve our sovereignty, is to improve and strengthen our citizens, surely.
Yeah, elbows up. No, I'm sorry. I felt very uncomfortable about that very early on in the discussion. I think it was harmful.
In an ironic way.
Yeah, and I can tell you that as the former president of the International Peace Garden last year, we held a Hands Across the Border event. And there were Americans lined up that we had, 1,000 people, and we didn't do a lot of promotion for it. So a lot of love that needs to be reinstated between the two countries.
Wonderful. And I think the International Peace Garden is the one that is on the boundary between Manitoba and North Dakota.
That's right.
Wonderful bridge building project between these two incredible nations as our cousins in the United States come up on their anniversary, namely July the 4th. So that's great, Dorothy, for your leadership. Marco, your thoughts on policy solutions to strengthen citizenship in this country?
I feel a bit out of place because, of course, I am a non-born citizen. I came from somewhere else.
That's okay.
I don't think my two fellow citizens guests of the show here will disagree with me, but I slightly take a different perspective on the issue. I think that it is important that people learn civics. But when I think about, for example, the people who populated the place where we live, the big West, they learned to love this land, and they didn't know how the government worked.
Yeah.
And so citizenship and the kind of bond that we're talking about is something that can be learned but cannot be taught. And the way that we make people learn it is by doing.
Mhm.
People will learn to love this country by watching the rest of us love this country. But here's the other feature. I think that any government-initiated desire to make citizenship more popular will make citizenship less popular. Because the problem here is that there is a strong correlation between the growth of the state and the disconnection between people and among people. The larger the government, the more the government mediates our dealings and our interactions with one another as people, as communities, as citizens, the weaker those bonds become.
Interesting.
And so what we need is less government programming intruding in our lives, because in the early days of this country, when Darcy McGee was going around, and he was an immigrant, he came from Ireland, but he learned to love this country not for its government, but because of the communities that made these people thrive. Going back to Gerry, this is about people. And so the structures are important. The institutions that sort of help us push those feelings and those sentiments forward are important. But the most important thing really is that the bonds of citizenship are bonds between and among individuals.
So well said, Marco. So just to clarify, so the state is not the same thing as civic society, is it?
No, it's not. No, it's not. And what we're talking about is the development of healthier communities and healthier civil societies.
Yeah. So one of the things I'm curious about, Gerry, is do traditions matter? I know you've spoken eloquently in the past as a historian that we've received an inheritance. I am sitting in front of two incredible flags, namely the Canadian flag, and in this particular case, because I'm located right now in Winnipeg, Manitoba, in front of the Manitoban flag. All those colors, all those designs have enormous historical significance, and there's a tradition. And so I'm wondering, is that part of the solution that we underestimate, is those traditions that anchor us to the history and story of this country and those before us?
Absolutely. A nation rests on the stories it agrees to tell to each other. The Americans are fabulous at this. They tell wonderful stories, many of them quite untrue. But that doesn't matter because it creates an Americanness. We are terrible, or have been terrible, at telling our own stories. When I was a young university student, I was intent on being a historian, but I looked at what was being offered in Canadian history, and it was all rivers and railroads. And get me out of here. Yeah, I want some action. So I became a Europeanist. But since then, I've discovered fabulous stories about our history, stuff that's jaw-dropping. And I really have to thank generations of local historians for preserving these and bringing them out. When we have mutually agreed upon stories, when we have mutually agreed upon heroes, when we sing the same songs, when we look to somebody like Gordon Lightfoot or the blessed Stan Rogers, who ought to be a saint, when we sing Barrett's Privateers or Northwest Passage or Canadian Railroad Trilogy. I was in London in 1968, the year after Expo, the year after our centennial. And Gordon Lightfoot came and played a concert in London, and the place must have been packed with Canadians. He sang Canadian Railroad Trilogy, and we would not let him off the stage. 43 curtain calls. My hands were sore from clapping.
Oh, wow.
It was at one time exciting to be a Canadian. I sense that that's a rare feeling these days, as our thinking class and our universities and our human rights commissions and our government agencies are intent on inculcating feelings of shame and erasure, of neutralizing us, of making us a blank slate on which new pieties can be imposed. The transnational state.
Indeed. So, Gerry, I can ask you as a follow-up then. You taught in a university for years, and I don't mean to generalize because there's a lot of great people in universities, but generally speaking, we have a serious, serious problem in our universities, particularly in the social sciences and humanities, where almost all of these faculty members, I say almost all, because not all of them are, many of them are devout Marxists. They self-describe themselves that. It's not like I'm making this up. Survey after survey shows us. Is it time that we put those universities out to pasture? Because they seem like they're the fountainhead, the origin in many ways, to undermining our citizenship and our unity, our sense of pride in what we're doing, because it's all about an upside down kingdom to them, where they see this as
my first day as king. When Gerry is crowned King of Canada, his first act is to call in an airstrike on university faculties of education and faculties of arts. Universities and human rights commissions are the two big enemies of civilization in the country. We have to have a fundamental rethink of what university is for. It's certainly failing in so many. I mean, I have been associated with universities since 1966. I still am. I still work for Duke University. So I love the university life and the academic life, but we've gone astray, and we have to have a fundamental rethink about what it's for and what Canadians.
And I insert that, I don't mean that out of disrespect to anybody, but the reality is that many of our institutions were founded and designed on particular principles that go back long before Canada was founded. And they were designed in a particular way to support, to empower this incredible history of civic culture, of community, people coming together and doing great things to build their community. And I look at that and I think these institutions need a house cleaning. They need to be able to be renovated or reimagined, because they're doing great harm. You mentioned human rights commissions. In fact, we just talked about that last week on the live. Can they be reformed or, frankly, defunded? And this is a good comment. So Go Big says, Frances Widdowson is one of the few going against universities that I know of. Exactly. She's a proud senior fellow at Frontier. I mean, this is the reality, is that many of these institutions don't ever backs anymore. Now, not completely in some cases. You have to look at specifics based on evidence here. But this is a clear and present danger. So my question to you, Marco, is how do we help reform these institutions? If we really want to look at this as a marathon, this is not for the faint of heart. We need to have a clear-eyed view that these institutions are, in fact, part of the problem. Would you agree?
Yes. One way to reform institutions, of course, is to re-inject new blood in them. And there isn't much of that around these days, considering that they have contributed to making the blood that there is out there. But there are some mechanisms. Governments, universities are words of provincial governments, not the central government. And so one thing that governs universities, these bodies called the senates or boards of governors, are appointed by provincial governments. And I think that provincial governments have the power to clean house, essentially eject all these people who have been enablers of the wokeness and everything else, and demand that universities continue to be what universities are supposed to be, as Gerry was saying, going back to their mandates. That might be one way. What we have against in this country is that most universities are government run. And so there is very little opportunity to start new universities with private capital and compete against the bad ones, the way the Americans have done and have done successfully oftentimes. But I think that universities as self-ruling institutions carry within themselves a kind of kernel of liberty and of hope that they can be renewed, but it will be an uphill battle.
Okay. Yeah. And just further to that, if you want to learn more about education policy, there's an awful lot of resources on the Frontier website that talks about in many ways the way to reform many of these institutions, including education, is don't give the money to the woke bureaucracy, the woke school board, but give and empower the money to parents, and they choose which school they want to go to, whether it's charter schools. There's many good examples of that in Alberta. Or a voucher system that's in many other jurisdictions around the world, including Sweden. Let people make the choice. Dorothy, your comments about renewing institutions?
Well, I just wanted to hark back to, it must be 15 years ago now, when Lloyd Axworthy was still the president of the University of Winnipeg. And we had a conversation. He said, this model is broken. This model needs to be reformed. It's not going to work. It's got to be fixed. Nothing much has happened since then. But it shows you that people have been worrying about what's going on for a long, long time, and it is time for it fixed. But it might fix it might be fixed just instinctively, because there is a trend right now for young people to look at their future and say, I don't really want to be stuck in an office. AI is going to take over all that. I want to go back there and do some real work. And we see, the institutions of college, community colleges and colleges taking over the education of a lot of young people, very hands-on, very real, led by people who are practical, who have what practical knowledge you want to pass on. I have a grandson who took his first 2 years of business administration at Red River College, and then went off and got his MBA at Asprey School of Business. So, which is, just like putting icing on the cake. And he said he learned far more at Red River than he ever did at the university. So that gives you an example of what's happening. And that might just be the answer for the future.
Very good. Well, on that note, I did want to mention that we just released a new book called, it's about talking about the peril of woke schools and the value of traditional education. And this is edited by the great William Brooks and Rodney Clifton at Frontier. I encourage people to get that book, because in that are a series of essays. And one of them is by yours truly about the value of polytechnic education. I was a proud vice president of what's called Red River Polytechnic. So I think that's another pathway to renewal, as you just mentioned, Dorothy. That's very apropos. I want to just start wrapping things up, but just before I do that, my final question is going to be, is there a book or a resource that you recommend, just like I did, that you recommend on citizenship? And I'll go first, not just, I just highlight the book about woke education and the value of traditional education. One of the series I grew up with was that my mother introduced me to, was this whole series of education by Pierre Burton. And I thoroughly enjoyed them. It was action-packed, as Gerry alluded to, like from the flames across the border to the last spike. I know it's about railways, but I loved it. To all kinds of topics. Canadian history is really amazing. And for me, that was inspiring, because not only could I learn about that history book, I could talk with my fellow Canadians about the contributions they made. And I could see that in practice. And that's what inspired me to get involved in active citizenship at a very young age. I think I was the youngest mayor in the country at one point. And so in that environment, that's what inspired me to be involved to this day. So, Gerry, do you have any recommended books or resources as we aspire to be better citizens?
Mark Milke's book, 1867.
Yes, very good book.
Yeah, wonderful. I think everybody should read that.
Very good. And what is it about?
It's about why Canada matters, why our Canadian history matters, particularly the visions of our founders, and why pride is a virtue that can actually inspire Canadians.
Very good. Marco?
I was. It's not because it's the best book for these things, but I think history is a great remedy for this thing. And I was recently thinking about this movement that also want to cancel Samuel de Champlain. And Champlain is one of the forefathers of this country in many ways. And there is a great biography by Beckett called simply, I think, Champlain. And it teaches not only what kind of a man he was, and in some ways he's a little glorified in the book, but you can sort of see the imprint of this man's personality in the beginnings of this country, and which is an important thing to remember. And how he interacted with the Aboriginals that he met, competing Aboriginals, and his diplomatic skills and his resilience and his tenacity to open up this country. He is certainly the figure of Champlain. Learning about Champlain has made me love this country more.
Remarkable. Great recommendation. Dorothy?
Well, I have to tell you that I was probably most inspired by Robert Service, partly because I love language and he certainly knew it, and it resonated in my childhood. My father knew all his poems by heart, and his books were inspiring to me as a young person. And I think it helps to ingrain that sense of Canadianism. If you have a social sense of association with the North, as I do, it almost feels like, it sounds a little mushy, but feels like the rivers run in your veins. Mm-hmm. And when you have that sense of communion with the country, with the countryside and the land, I don't know. It's I think that was it you who was speaking about Gerry, about the fact that this is more than just a top-down government type thing. It's a feeling that we have, a connection that we have with the land itself. I thought Robert W. Service really kind of related me to that.
Absolutely. He was so beloved. He was one of the best-selling poets on the planet.
Yeah.
His poems made him a rich man. Very, very hard to find a rich poet these days. Yes, the lady known as Lou, strange things done beneath the midnight sun. Absolutely, yeah.
The dangerous Dan McGrew. I mean, yes. In fact, on long road trips, we still dig that up and sort of recite these poems back and forth to one another. I force it down people's throats.
Very good.
Well, it's amazing. We need to know our stories. One comment here is from Nick Lund. Absolutely nothing is holding this nation together. All they've done is constantly divided into groups, and there's no sign of that changing. Well, that's certainly a really important insight. And that's the point, is that there's a lot of people who do care about this country. And one of the things that inspires me is, frankly, the comments, the audience that we have on Leaders is truly inspiring. We get some 20, 30,000 notes and letters every month. And so much of it is just overwhelmingly positive. People care about this country, and let's don't forget that. And that's what gives us future hope to be able to continue to build it. So now is a time in our history where we need to continue to think incisively and creatively about how we nurture that strong sense of identity. If you realize the tactics of the radical left is to divide our identity into tribalism. Our identity needs to be citizens of Canada, full stop, and that will unite us together. And so that's the spirit in which we're having this conversation. So I want to thank very much Dorothy Dobbie, former MP, for coming together, and publisher, as well as Dr. Gerry Bowler, historian and senior fellow at Frontier, and of course, the great Marco Navarro-Genie, Vice President of Research at Frontier. So thank you for joining us. And on that note, I want to wish you a happy Canada Day.
Happy Canada Day, David, and all.
Happy Dominion Day.
Happy Dominion Day. Thank you very much, Marco. Yeah.
So I hope you celebrate that. And I wanted to share, as we get to the end, a wonderful comment from Cracker Crumbs, pardon me. David, you have awesome guests on with great topics. Very informative as always. Need these deep topics more. Thank you. And that makes my day, whoever you are, because I know your real name isn't Cracker Crumbs. But what I do know is, again, Canadians do care, and let's build this nation. And in that note, I want to share with you, and I apologize, help me with this point of trivia. Who wrote and sang a song in celebration of the 1967 Expo in Canada, celebrating the centennial of the founding of this country? I'm going to play that music with the help of the producer, if we can. But I thought, growing up, I remember this vaguely as a child, and I always thought it was pretty inspiring about loving Canada.
David, before we go, remind folks to go to the website and take the citizenship test.
Oh my gosh,
that we
I
have.
apologize. You know what? I am going to insist that we have a little bit of an extended version here, and I apologize. That was one of our highlights here. On the Frontier website, we want to promote citizenship. And one of the ways to do that is, can you pass the Canadian citizenship test? So let's zip through that quickly here. What are Canada's 2 official languages?
Are we supposed to answer?
That's a hard one.
I would say that would be English and French as
Of course.
noted. And who is Canada's head of state? Well, who is
Mark.
that?
Mark Carney, for your Prime Minister, what do you want for that one?
The Prime Minister, okay.
Or you want
What
the
is
Governor
the-
General?
Oh, back up.
You want the Governor General?
No.
Or
It
the
is
King?
Governor General.
That would be the RCMP. The term Dominion of Canada, as Gerry so aptly mentioned before, was suggested by which father of Confederation, and from what source was he inspired? Well, that would be Sir John A. Macdonald.
No.
Oh no, it was
Can't be it.
Tilly.
it was Tilly.
It was
inspired by
Tilly.
Psalm 72.
And that's Psalm 72. Imagine that. The British North America Act of 1867 established which 4 original provinces of the Dominion of Canada?
Yeah, Ontario, Quebec, New Brunswick, and
Nova
Nova Scotia.
So B is correct. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms opens with which foundational phrase?
B.
I can't see it, so
B, whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. Which of the following correctly describes the composition of Parliament in Canada's federal system?
That would be B again.
That would be B again, the Sovereign, the Senate, and the House of Commons. The current maple leaf flag, which first raised in 1965, takes its red, white, red pattern from, by the way, someone in the audience knows this. I saw it 45 minutes ago.
the Maple Leaf. I guess I can't see the answers or the questions here, so I'm just guessing.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah,
well,
I can see.
The flag of the Royal Military College in Kingston, founded in 1876, I believe.
Yeah.
O Canada was first sung publicly in which city, and in what year was it proclaimed the official national anthem?
Quebec in 1880.
You are correct. Excellent. Prince Edward Island holds which of the following distinctions?
Smallest province, birthplace of Confederation, and connected to mainland Canada by the Confederation Bridge.
That is correct. The smallest province. Manitoba is notable for several facts. Which of the following is accurately stated in Discover Canada?
Can't read them.
Let's see you Manitobans here.
I can't see the suggested
Well-
answers, so I don't know what they're looking for.
Yeah, so this
must
would be, and I know, Dorothy, you know this answer. Winnipeg St. Boniface District has Western Canada's largest Francophone community at 45,000, and
Mhm.
Manitoba has the largest Aboriginal population of any province at over 15%. So that is a representation of those questions. I encourage people to go online and fill that questionnaire, and that would be your good task or homework to be a citizen as you run up to Canada Day. So thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and thank you for that extended little version of the program today. And we'll wrap things up and look forward to next week. And thank you to our guests again. And of course, our producer, Lorraine, and MCA Media. And be sure to join us next week on the same time and same place on Leaders on the Frontier Live.
Here at Frontier, we don't receive any government funding. We are nonpartisan and we work for you. Find out more and support this important work by visiting fcpp.org today.